Okay, so here we go. Al Tizon is Executive Minister of Serve Globally, the international ministries of the Evangelical Covenant Church. This position includes a faculty appointment as Affiliate Professor of Missional and Global Leadership at North Park Theological Seminary. Al has engaged in community development, church leadership, advocacy, and urban ministry in the United States and in the Philippines. Previous positions he has held include founding director of Light Ministries in the Olongapo City, Philippines, lead pastor at Berkeley Covenant Church in Berkeley, California, holistic ministry director and then president of Christians for Social Action, formerly Evangelicals for Social Action, and associate professor of holistic ministry at Palmer Theological Seminary of Eastern University near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Al is the author or editor of 6 books, including Transformation After Lausanne, Radical Evangelical Mission in Local and Global Perspective, Missional Preaching, and Whole and Reconciled, Gospel, Church, and Mission in a Fractured World. Al received his BA in Religious Studies and his MA in Church Leadership Studies from Vanguard University of Southern California. He received his PhD in missiology from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. Al is an ordained minister of the Evangelical Covenant Church. Al and his wife Janice live in the San Francisco Bay Area in close proximity to their 4 grown children and 5 grandchildren. Al Tizon.
I'm hearing those claps. Thank you. Thank you for the welcome. Thank you for the introduction, Juana. It's so good to be here. Um, you know, that introduction, you can call me a lot of things. But what I tell people is that my favorite title is Grandpa. If you really want to get to my heart, you just call me Grandpa. I love being a grandfather of 5 little ones who most of them, 4 out of the 5 live here, right here in the Bay Area. And it's been great. For those of you, by the way, who are wondering why I'm living here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we moved here last summer when the Covenant Church decided to go digital first permanently. This is in response to COVID, but the response was more long term, and said, you know what, we're not going back to normal. We're going to go ahead and be on the cutting edge of things, and we're going to go digital first, even after COVID. So that lifted the requirement for people to live really wherever they want, because you can Zoom from anywhere. And so we thought we'd just get closer to our kids. Um, whether or not that decision was good for the church, it remains to be seen. But we took advantage and moved back to the Bay Area where our family is. So um, thank you again for inviting me to be part of this, and thank you for living out Lent the way you are this year. I mean, you've sought ways to love your neighbor as yourselves by becoming more aware of injustices in the world and then poising yourselves to take action. Contrary to Lent as just being a time when we give things up for 40 days, it can also be more meaningfully a time to learn about how to live more like Jesus. What a concept. And honestly, I can't think of a better way to become more Christ-like than to learn how to love our neighbors deeply and sacrificially. So thank you, Pastors Phil and Juana and Stockton Covenant, for opening this up. I'm tempted to take a kind of a hand poll to figure out where people are coming from, because I know you've opened this up to everybody. But really, thank you for modeling for the rest of us how to utilize the Christian calendar to God's glory and our neighbor's good. I want to say a prayer. God, thank you so much for this space. It's going to be a hard space as we talk about a really hard, emotionally charged issue tonight. And we just pray your spirit come and lead and guide and challenge and inspire us to action to do something about this great injustice of sex trafficking in the world. Will you help us, Lord? We come open, open eyes, open hearts, open minds, open hands. Use us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Our neighbor's good. You know, I love this pietist or this traditional covenant church phrase to describe a core part of our mission in the world. And tonight I feel compelled to say some words about an evil, about this evil and disturbing industry that dehumanizes, degrades, and exploits millions of our neighbors, both locally and globally. And I'm talking about human trafficking, more specifically, sex trafficking. Folks, I am sorry to say that sex trafficking is a booming business. It generates almost $100 billion in illegal profits today, making it one of the largest sources of income for organized crime. Here's some more numbers for us to consider as we think about loving our neighbors, these neighbors. An estimated 4.7 million people, mostly but not exclusively women and girls, are caught in sex trafficking today. Let that number sink in, 4.7 million persons. Asia and the Pacific region account for 73% of the victims of forced sexual exploitation globally. That was the stat in 2016. I couldn't find a more current stat. It's probably higher. Whereas Europe and Central Asia's regions account for 14%, another 8% of sex trafficking victims had citizenship issued in Africa, and some 4% came from the Americas. And approximately 250,000 to 350,000 American children and youth are at risk for sex trafficking each year. Now, what these numbers should tell us is that sex trafficking is happening, not just over there, but right here. And if these stats are not disturbing enough, the COVID lockdown, wherein the whole world went virtual, has made matters even worse for the sexually trafficked. Now, you would think that since people can't travel, that the industry would have taken a hit, but not the case. Instead, cyber sex trafficking has grown exponentially. The trafficked are still used and abused, raped and re-raped, and forced to perform sexual acts. Only now, they're being filmed for the enjoyment, I hope that you see my air quotes, enjoyment of those willing and eager to pay to see these things from thousands of miles away. And not surprisingly, most of the demand for this comes from North America, Europe, and parts of Asia, such as Japan and Taiwan. If it's true, and it is, that loving our neighbor means first to love our most vulnerable neighbors, then the sexually trafficked should rank high on our list. Now, who are the sexually trafficked? Well, they're those who, against their will, are sold and bought for the sexual gratification of a sex-crazed global public. The sexually trafficked are not just sex workers, they are trafficked sex workers. That is, they were sold, sometimes by their very families who are trying to escape the ravages of poverty, and then bought by a syndicate or caught, such as the case of street children and orphans, by the same for the purpose of forcing them into the sex trade. So they're not just sex workers, they're trafficked, they're forced sex workers. So a simple description of the sex trafficking victim would be a person who is forced to satisfy the sexually gluttonous appetite of the global public. Let me repeat that. A simple description of the sex trafficking victim would be a person who is forced to satisfy the sexually gluttonous appetite of the global public. Some of these sexually trafficked get a small cut of the proceeds, and others do not. Either way, the sexually trafficked are enslaved to this kind of life. It's modern day slavery in many real ways. Beyond children being sold or taken from the streets, traffickers also prey on individuals that are susceptible to coercion by luring them with the promise of work or shelter or food or relational support or all the above. These individuals, women, children, um, girls and boys, sexual minorities, migrants, refugees. These are just some examples of susceptible individuals. These tend to be fleeing poverty or war or political instability, persecution, natural disasters, economic hardship, and any combination thereof. Traffickers also target individuals with histories of trauma, family violence, drug dependency, homelessness, social isolation, and little to no education. Women, children, and minority groups typically experience higher rates of exploitation. In the United States, 84% of reported cases of sex trafficking were female, and a third were under the age of 18. The average age for a sexually trafficked person globally is 13. 13. 40% of those confirmed trafficking cases are Black women and girls. And studies have found that Native Americans, including Native Alaskans, are disproportionately represented in sex trafficking. These patterns reveal an intersectionality that makes the most vulnerable in our societies the ones most likely to be victims of sex trafficking. If we want to love our neighbors, and if that means loving the most vulnerable of our neighbors, these 4.7 million people, mostly women and children, are our neighbors whom we need to figure out how to love as ourselves. The damage done on the sexually trafficked is extensive and comprehensive. How can it not be? Right? They are stripped of their humanity, their dignity, their true sexuality. If they survive the years of abuse and somehow escape the life forced upon them, their road to restoration is a long, steep incline of overcoming deep trauma due to physical, sexual, social, psychological, and emotional abuse. You know, as executive minister of Serve Globally and the other hats that I've worn also through the last few decades, I've gotten to see and be involved in many different issues. But it's this issue that gets the most visceral and most traumatic reaction out of me. My heart breaks beyond repair for the women and girls being sexually trafficked. I remember a few years ago in India, when leaders of our partner church, the Hindustani Covenant Church, took me to Budhavar Path, essentially the red light district of the city of Pune. For complicated reasons that would probably take up the rest of our time explaining, we were able to enter one of the brothels. And what I saw there, friends, is permanently etched in my mind. First of all, it was nothing like how Hollywood portrays brothels, okay? It was poorly lit, dirty, damp. It smelled stale. But it was the women, some who look so young, that will forever be a part of my psyche. The eyes looked hollow to me. Cruelly, cruelly trained to look sexy. They were physically there, all made up. But everything else about them told me that they were psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually dead. They seemed beyond desperate. They seemed just resigned to their place, their fate. Um, I saw men too, some who also looked very young, going in and out of the place. You know, it It was blood curdling and heartbreaking at the same time. I wanted to run the men off with a stick, you know, kill the madams and run away with the girls. I just wanted to do that. I remember the same mix of anger and pain when meeting Filipino women. Even more so did my blood curdle and my heart break, just because, you know, the fellow Filipinos. But I remember meeting Filipino women at this beach resort called Puerto Galera off the southern coast of the island of Luzon in the Philippines. They were companions of men from Germany, Australia, and the United States. And I was able to sit with the women just long enough to get parts of their stories speaking in our native tongue, so, you know, we could talk about the men without them knowing it. And they, you know, these women, they were mothers and older sisters who were essentially coerced to be with these men by their families in order to bring food to the table. Blood curdling, heartbreaking at the same time. This is sex trafficking, folks, on the visceral level. Well, how can we possibly respond to this horrific evil in the world? And it's a giant, I mean, 99 billion or almost $100 billion industry. You try to mess with it and your life is in danger. I mean, that's the kind, and organized crime is a part of it. I mean, it's, how do we do this? How do we respond? How do we love these neighbors as ourselves? Well, for the Covenant Church's part, Serve Globally and the other mission priority of Love, Mercy, Do Justice have collaborated together to form the FREE initiative, which is ECC's attempt to join the fight. FREE calls individuals and churches to pray, learn, give, and act. Remember these four, because I want to talk more in depth about these four: pray, learn, give, and act, with and through key partners whom we have vetted to challenge sex trafficking both domestically and globally. Its primary driver, FREE, the initiative, its primary driver is people and church mobilization against sex trafficking through key partners in our neighborhoods and around the world. I want to show you a video that we put together just to call churches to this work. Let's see, I'm going to try to be a techie here. Share screen. And where are you? Okay. Share sound.
God who sees, God who hears, God who transforms. We pray for the transformation of our unjust and violent world.
Around 4.7 million people are caught in sex trafficking globally every year, and the average age of a sex trafficked victim is only 13 years old.
God who sees, God who hears, God who transforms, instill in us a teachable spirit to learn in order to gain awareness that moves us into action, in order to break the cycles of trafficking.
Worldwide, sex trafficking generates $99 billion in profits. 40% of those confirmed trafficking cases are of Black women and girls. And studies have found that Native Americans and Native Alaskans are disproportionately represented in sex trafficking.
God who sees, God who hears, God who transforms, create in our heart a willingness to give, to the prevention, the intervention, and the rehabilitation of trafficked children and adults to create safer and more holistic communities.
Marginalized people are deemed disposable by those with power, robbing them of their God-created freedom and dignity.
God who sees, God who hears, God who transforms, make us companions to act through advocacy with the survivors to pursue your shalom for all of our communities.
Through Free, a collaborative initiative of Serve Globally and Love Mercy, Do Justice, we engage with the issue of sex trafficking by mobilizing the global church through the framework of pray, learn, give, and act domestically and globally.
God who sees, God who hears, God who transforms. Remind us today to be your church. Remind us that our liberation is tied to the freedom of others, and move us in ways only you can to pray, learn, give, and act together so that all may be free.
I want to share something else with you here. You would think I'd be better by now about sharing things, but hold on one second. So I want to highlight a couple of things from this video. First, Free has chosen to work exclusively through partners. I want to, are you seeing this? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Okay. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are good people on the ground, good organizations, both domestically and globally, who are doing great work. And so instead of trying to create our own way of doing this, we decided that the best way to mobilize our churches is to connect them through Free to partners doing this kind of work around the world. Free then is not another organization to add to the list of anti-sex trafficking orgs. Rather, it seeks to develop official partnerships on both local and global levels. So when churches join the fight through Free, it joins a network of partners. And we have so far 10 partner organizations. And what I'm scrolling here for you is just the names of the partners. 6 of them are domestic, and each of them are here. So I do want to encourage you after this presentation to remember to go to covchurch.org/free to gain a better understanding about each of these partners and what unique approaches or services they offer to trafficked victims. So 6 of them are domestic, and then 4 of them are global. And our goal is to have at least one partner in each of the 11 conferences. And we do have one at the Pacific Southwest Conference, and that is the New Day for Children. Some of you may be familiar with it, but we want to have at least one partner in each of the 11 conferences that make up the Covenant Church. And then for our global partners, we want at least one in each of the 5 regions of the world that Serve Globally works. So Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, and then the Middle East North Africa, or MENA. We want at least one for each. So we would love to have, by in the next few years, have identified 16 partners that we will vet, but also bring together on a regular basis so they can compare notes and become a kind of functional network that we can, as churches, plug into. So another thing that I want to point out from the video is the structure, the four components of pray, learn, give, act. And as you can see in our website, we have resources in each of those for churches to avail of. You know how to pray, but how do we pray specifically for this evil in the world? Well, there are lots of different ways. The Lenten prayer guide. I wish that I wish I had pointed this out at the beginning of Lent, but it's here for Lent and beyond to use as a guide to have an intentional, practiced prayer for these 4.7 million people, some of them which I'm convinced are in Stockton, California, and wherever else, whatever other city is represented in this call. So there's prayer. Some of our partners have also, we've listed some of our partners' ways in which you can pray. The Revolt Prayer Movement that's hosted by Priceless, which is our partner in the Alaska Conference, and so on. That's prayer. And then it's really important that we educate ourselves in this. How do we, what is going on in our communities, and who is involved in doing these things? Tonight is a great example of, creating the space for us to learn a little bit more about what's going on. And like in the prayer section, we have resources here for you as churches, as individuals, to come and just explore, figure out how you can use these tools to better learn about this evil in the world. And then, of course, there's give. We need to put our money where our mouth is, where our hearts bleed. How can we mobilize and help or come alongside these partners who are always looking for financial resources to do the kinds of things they want to do? And so we have created a way through free to support these partners. So we are encouraging our churches to give through free, so that we can manage the resources in an equitable way to our partners. But there are also products you can buy that contribute to the work. They're right there on the screen on the right hand side. And then finally, there's ACT. We can pray and we can learn, and we need to give, but how are ways in which we can actually get our hands dirty for the sake of these neighbors? How can we get involved? And we're hoping that as we get more connected to these partners, that they will provide ways in which individuals and churches can get involved directly. And there's some of these, some other ways is, you can host a free Sunday. For example, July 30th is the World Against Trafficking Day, and use that as a way to make people aware in our churches. So the ACT piece is something we're really going to work on with our partners to figure out how exactly churches and individuals can get involved. I want to stop sharing here, and I want to end with this. And by end, I mean, let's talk. Church, sisters and brothers, let's talk. I want to hear your questions. I may not have the answers, but I want to hear your questions. We need to engage as a church to figure out what our place is, what our role is in this fight. But I want to end with this: free and any of our efforts to fight sex trafficking begins with each of us, with our hearts and our habits. Remember that sex trafficking is a business. And like any business, the idea of supply and demand apply. If there is no demand, there is no need to supply goods to meet that demand. In this season of Lent and beyond, let's examine ourselves and root out anything that contributes to the demand side of this evil. What are we tolerating on TV and the movies? Have we given in to the lure of pornography? What is the needle of our lust meters saying to us? More positively, are we still in the spirit striving towards sexual purity? Are we respecting and loving our spouses in deep and creative ways? Are we educating our children about the gift of sexuality that comes from God? To the extent that we move towards sexual wholeness in Christ ourselves, we can become a genuine threat to the evil of sex trafficking as we join the fight. And God's people said, Amen. I could say so much more, but really I wanted to leave enough time to just process this with you. I don't know how you heard this. It might be review for some of you. Some of you might be far enough along in this issue that you can teach us how to do this better. But I don't even know how many people are on the call, Juana and Phil, but if there's a way to change the view here so I could see everybody.
So if you hit gallery, you can see everyone.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. See, again, I should know this now. I should know this by now. Everybody should be like Zoom experts by now. But so, folks, how are you feeling? Is this news new? Have you been aware? I'd really would love to hear your thoughts. If you want to use the chat to raise your question or ask your question, please do that. But also feel free to unmute and just ask.
So, Trisha, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
So it's hard to put my question into words right now because I'm so sort of just overwhelmed by the horrors. But so I'm wondering if there are things that you can suggest that we would be able to, ways we could see things happening in our communities that we can step in and do. I don't know, but I wonder if you could give any ideas and suggestions about that.
Yeah, as we become, keener in our, if we have our antennas up and we can begin to see things that normally we wouldn't see at all or not do anything about. And when we see minors, for example, who are with adults and don't look happy, it's okay to just call 911 and just say, hey, I don't know if this is anything, but I don't like what I'm seeing here. So there are ways that we can see the body language of minors, especially, and children it's there's a fine line too, because we have our own biases and prejudices that we have to really guard against. We don't want to we don't want to end up, profiling unintentionally based on our own biases. That we don't want to do that. But when we become more aware of our own biases and also just body language, seeing um, mean adults. I mean, when we see those things, I don't know what your reaction is, but if I'm not aware, it's like, oh, well, they're just, they're just having a family spat or something. To now these days, as I'm becoming more and more aware of sex trafficking and human trafficking, I put a check in my mind, and then when I'm far enough away from the situation, I make a call. I just say, I don't know if this is anything, but I just want to be safer than um, it may be nothing, but I want to let you know that I think there's a suspicious situation here. So that's one thing. And then I also want to encourage you to look up New Day, which is right here in our own conference, and get more tips from Sharon and the other leaders there. Kathy Wilson, the superintendent's wife, is also very involved with New Day. They can give you more tips on how to and what to look for as we go out in the marketplaces and the streets. Thank you for the question, Tricia. That is so important. It's our awareness that's going to perhaps save some young children who are being coerced and forced into these kinds of things.
So I have a question as far as like even specifics. Like if you were going to call somebody, would who would you like who would you report things to? Because I actually had a situation yesterday,
Mm,
kind of bizarre. I was praying with some friends outside of Planned Parenthood for a 40 Days for Life thing.
hmm
There was a, a young girl and a man bringing her in, and she was very obviously unhappy. And it was very awkward. It wasn't like a boyfriend thing. It was very weird. And we were
Wow.
all kind of going, what do we
Yeah.
do? And we offered help, but I thought, okay, we could have gotten his license plate. What I don't like. Who would we call?
Well, the 911.
Okay,
Yeah, I know you can call 911. There are hotlines, and I wonder in our website whether there's a hotline number, but you can just call 911 and they will connect you to these hotlines.
okay,
911 is there for these sorts of things. And so if you're suspicious about any situation, 911 is your first go-to.
okay. Yeah, that's the first time I think I've ever seen something that like. Well, I mean, we're always talking to people and stuff, but that one we were all like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, this is really wrong."
And that was just yesterday. This is fresh, isn't it? This
Yes,
wasn't years ago. This was yesterday.
yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
In Stockton.
Evelyn, did you have a question? I think I saw your hand icon up. Yeah.
So as we see it happening, sex trafficking in our communities, um, I think so. There's just a quick story of my sister when she was in high school. She's 20. She's early 20s now. But there was a young lady who was being held against her will. And so this is happening in our communities where it's just openly happening on a main street. And so it's so heartbreaking because I think um, it's not anything new. I mean, I think the police department sees it. And so, and I know it could also be dangerous, right? Like getting off the car and saying, "Are you okay? Can I
Yeah.
help you?" Because they're
Yeah.
being watched. And
Right.
so my question would be, if the police department knows what's going on and it's just openly happening, what to do then? And then there was one second question that I was wondering, and I wasn't sure about, but um, what right now are women who are being human trafficked and police stop them? Are they convicted? if they're underage, or what happens to them?
Well, I wish some of our partners who are on the ground were here to answer some of these questions more intelligently. I mean, I want to be honest with you. I come at this much more viscerally and emotionally, and I go to our partners to tell us what to do, because and so I'm still learning about what we can do. I can say this, Evelyn, that that intervention is dangerous work. If you see something, and you're going to try to intervene in any way, your life is in danger. Because you're dealing with people's income. The one verse that has really come alive as I've gotten more aware of this issue is Paul's. I can't even tell you the chapter and verse, but the love of money is the root of all evil. And money is driving this, and you get in the way of somebody's economics, and you're in trouble. So I mean, the best thing is to call 911 and keep track of the situation. If you can at a distance just see what's going on, so that when the police do arrive, you're able to point out, or because they're trained to deal with these issues, and we're not. So is that what your question is? Like, what can we do directly to intervene in situations? I can't hear you very well.
Sorry, could you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That was my question. I think as we see this, and it's so heartbreaking, what steps can we take?
Yeah. And I'm not saying don't, because gospel work is dangerous. So I'm not saying don't intervene. Sometimes we just have to. If we see somebody getting pummeled or beat up and abused right there in public, I mean, there's no, and you don't want to wait 15 minutes for the cops to come. Then we have to act, and the situation is going to define what we do in that moment, right? But I mean, the best thing in I was going to say ideal circumstances, but this is by far not ideal. But if you can make a call to 911 and stay out of it, that's probably the safest way. But again, sometimes that's not an option. Nina, I think you put some phone numbers in the chat, some hotline numbers. Yeah, I mean, yeah, call those if you have, keep those handy. You can call 911, but you can also call these numbers. Thank you for pointing those out. Yes.
So I have a question that I got in the chat, and then we have Emily and Michelle who have a question as well.
Great. Thanks for keeping track. Yes.
Evan. So Evan, so thank you. So the first question in the chat is, do you have a story about making a call that turned out to be a sex trafficking situation?
I personally do not. But if you were to, call some of these partners, was anybody at the launch? We did a January launch of this initiative. I don't know if anybody was there, but some of our partners were there sharing stories of traffic situations, and where they intervened, and some of the people who actually shared were survivor leaders. And so I personally do not have a story about making a call, and indeed it was a traffic situation, but many of our partners would. So
great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Al. Pastor Michelle.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
I really don't have a question. I just wanted to make a comment because I ran a human trafficking organization called Love Never Fails, and I was the operations manager. And I also provided clinical counseling with these women children. We ran a safe house. I was over 2 safe houses. And to your question, Ms. Evelyn, you had asked about if they're underage, if they're prosecuted. No, they're not.
Oh yeah.
I have been a part, we had rapport with, it was in the Bay Area, so we had rapport with detectives and the police department. So I was invited to a couple of stings that were going on. And if the girls were caught and they were underage, even if they were older, because we had women in the house that were 18 all the way up to 50. So, you know, it was a whole mixture of ages, but the goal was to try to get them help, to try to get them services. And, you know, if we had openings, we had beds available for them and the children, they would come to the house. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, I think it really starts with educating our young people in our youth departments, giving them education on different things, you know, to know about how these perpetrators and how these pimps or whatever try to lure them in. They get lured in because of, just like you said, different backgrounds, coming from a foster care system, from trauma, things like that. You know, they come in the form of a boyfriend, and sometimes they just come in meeting these young girls and they're violent from the beginning. So it's really having our young people and our youth become educated and to have an awareness of their surroundings on what's going on when they get introduced. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's women.
Yeah.
I've had staff, because this is a Christian organization. So I had women who were out there, and, you know, God saved them and changed their life, but they were female pimps. They were out there recruiting young girls themselves. So it's not always the guys, but I think, you know, educating our youth and letting them be aware of what's going on out there, because they're just totally caught off guard with a lot of things. And also, I lived in Thailand for a little while.
Wow.
I had an opportunity to visit the red light district.
Yeah.
And it blew me away.
Yeah.
Well, and it was amazing to me how this is a legal business in Thailand, but if you get caught with drugs, you get the death penalty. Really? So, you know, it is going on right here in our backyard. You know, we've had to rescue young girls off the street. We had outreaches that went on from midnight until like 3 a.m.
Wow.
You know, trying to help them, you know, and it's a lot of things that are involved in it. It's bigger than just a Bible study, bringing them to church. Like you said, it is a lot of trauma. It's a lot of mental, emotional, and physical abuse.
Everything
that come in from the family. So I do have some information, Pastor Juana, if you know, want me to bring you literature. I have a whole laundry list of information and just resources and just educational things just for your awareness.
I'm so glad you are here. Can you tell me your name?
I'm Pastor Michelle.
Pastor Michelle. I'm
Yes,
so
sir.
glad you're here. I knew that there would be, you know, at least 1 or 2 or 3 on the call that would actually know more than I. I mean, again, I'm trying to gather these partners and I'm doing these things, but I have so much more to learn about the details of this kind of work. And so, Pastor Michelle, you are a gift tonight. When somebody asks me a question about what to do, I'm going to say, "What do you think, Pastor Michelle? Maybe you can tell us how to."
And I want to say to you, my brother, it is such a blessing to have you do what you're doing and be a part of this, because one of the things that I did with counseling with the girls, they had never had an intervention with a healthy man that really had their best heart at interest, like really was concerned about them coming out of the life, about learning how to trust someone. Because a lot of this stuff started with their fathers, with
That's
their
right.
fathers. You know, I was told I could understand a stranger wanting to do this to me, but when my father sold me into trafficking, when my grandfather molested me, that is what destroyed my life the most. So to have someone such as yourself having a heart and a passion for this work, to sit down so they can see a healthy version of what a God-like man is, you are making a tremendous difference. And I just want to say that to you.
Amen.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
And we're getting really close on our time for Q&A. So Emily and Evan, I know, had been waiting. So Emily,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Al, for sharing. I'm curious, you mentioned in your presentation that you shared how hypersexualized our culture is, you know, and I know that that is like an understatement. And so I was curious, you know, given your different leadership roles and experiences within the church, from your perspective, how could the church talk or preach or teach about sex differently to help speak out and against the culture of sex trafficking?
Yeah, what a great question. Because again, it's the demand side that makes this possible, right? And so in a hypersexualized society, which, you know, which is, I'm trying to think of any society I've been to that's not hypersexualized anymore. But we could say this, in a hypersexualized world, how do we counter that with the gospel? Well, I mean, for me to talk about sexual wholeness as opposed to sexual sin is my starting point, right? Because sexuality is a gift from God, and to talk about it like that, to talk about the positive side of sexuality, it's a beautiful thing. Between two people who love each other, it's a beautiful thing, and I want to talk like that as opposed to coming across like a fuddy-duddy who doesn't want anybody to have any fun. I mean, that's sort of what happens when we focus on the don'ts of sex. We lose our audience because the society is so hypersexualized. And so to talk about sexuality as a gift then paves the way to talk about how sexual brokenness happens, and they're able to detect what is broken. You know, when you know, as tantalizing as pornography might be, that is the driver for this. You know, people just hungry for images, and it's like, wow, this is a real trap, because if you just get even close to that door, it just sucks you in, and suddenly you're just needing those images, and that need is what perpetuates this evil. So start with sexual wholeness, talk about it positively, and then that paves the way to talk about where things are broken. And then, you know, in Christ, we need to encourage our people, young and old, to strive for wholeness and purity, not in a fuddy-duddy way, but in this beautiful creative way that the way God intended sexuality to be experienced. Is that helpful, Emily?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I just kept coming to mind about it being a discipleship issue. And I love that idea of starting with wholeness, which is something that I don't always think, even though the intentions were perhaps good, that purity culture within the church, I don't think always starts with that. Yeah. And so I really appreciate you sharing more on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Al. And I don't know if Evan is still with us, but Evan had a question.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is more of a request, but I'm interested from the perspective of like coming from learning about and being interested and trying to practice how we build power in communities that are marginal in different ways in order to create the changes that we want in challenging, you know, exploitive systems and practices. And a kind of a request to, I would be interested, and I think it would be really powerful to like bring in more voices or reach out to people who have experienced human traffic, who are advocates, but who have lived experience of being human trafficked.
Yes.
Or sex trafficked, and you know, asking them about solutions and the best ways to help. because I think that would be kind of just like, you know, it would allow us to learn more, and then also more people like Pastor Michelle who are on the side of experiencing, you know, serving people that are experiencing that tragedy.
Yeah.
And kind of both. But yeah, I think that would be really, I think, powerful. And just, I don't personally know anyone, but I don't know how to reach out to those people necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Evan, that's thank you for that question. And I want to point again to, well, yes, people like Pastor Michelle who has or continue to be involved in the direct work with trafficking victims. But that I can say that about every one of our partners. And so when you join this movement, this fight, free, what we're calling free, it opens the door for you to explore with any or all of these organizations who are on the ground, some of them being led by what they call survivor leaders. And I mean, if you want stories, they've got them. And if what we need is some steps to take to get involved, they have those. Let me encourage you, Evan, to go to the covchurch.org/free and explore those resources, and join us in this fight. One thing I want to say, and then Juan, I'll give it back to you. You know, it's really complex, this whole sex trafficking. It's not just about sexuality. In fact, I want to say, as a community development worker in the Philippines for 10 years, that indirectly but very, very related is poverty. If we can begin to put in place poverty fighting efforts, that will do wonders for diminishing the power of sex trafficking. Poverty. I mean, can you imagine being parents, not knowing how to feed your children, not knowing where the food's going to come, and they have to decide this excruciating decision to sell one of their children in order to feed their other children? I mean, that's going on. And so to fight sex trafficking in an indirect but very related way is to fight poverty, to fight injustice, etc. So it's just a very complicated situation that requires a systems approach to tackle this. So I could say so much more, but Juana, I'm going to pass it back to you.
So I have one more, and I know that there's a lot of questions that we may not get to, as we want to honor the time and be able to get into small groups. But we have Mary March, Kappa president, on the line, and she has a question or something to share, and then we'll.
Fantastic.
Hi, Al.
Hi, Mary.
I'm Mary Chung March, and I think I wanted to bring this down to a very personal level, because before I was a pastor, I served as a youth and family counselor at a place called the Bridge for Youth in Minneapolis, and I got to work with trafficked females, and one person in particular stands out to me. She was 13. And so pimps actually are very scary, and they're pretty smart. Or the system is, they have a way of brainwashing and breaking girls in. So like the segment about Pastor Michelle saying, you need to educate your youth, or the youth, is very important. Mm-hmm. Minneapolis or Minnesota is a hot spot. They go to the Mall of America and they see girls hanging out. And if they can profile you and say, yeah, she looks like she comes from a hard home, or, maybe she has no networks, they will go up to that person and say, do you want to be a movie star? I can make you a movie star. You're beautiful. So it can start like that. And they say, and, do you have a home? Do you have parents? And they just kind of get to know you and befriend you. And then, if you do come from a tough home, or you feel like no one cares for you at home, you're like, yeah, I want to be a movie star. And then, so number one, they displace you. So all possible resources that you have, being friends, school, parents, church, any networks, they remove you. So this 13-year-old, and she looked like 19. This 13-year-old was from California, and she was in Minneapolis, and the cops picked her up. And this is the thing, pimps can replace the women at any time. Doesn't matter, right? Because they're not the ones in the hotel rooms. So the cops come, and who gets punished, right? It's the prostitute. And the cops know to bring them to the bridge. And so, because, you know, at least maybe they can be helped. But I think also to recognize is she has been displaced, she has been brainwashed. In her particular situation, the pimp was like, you're the only one I love. There's a lot of violence.
Yeah.
Any money she makes, she doesn't get it. It's, you know, enslavement. And if you cut off all possible resources, she has no other choice. And then I'll just leave you with this one other thought. You know, the Bridge for Youth, it's like a homeless shelter for youth. And then we have transitional housing stuff. We also take them on field trips, you know, and we kind of just, you know, take them to baseball games and things like that. And I remember we were driving and she was with us and she was very scared too. She's like, my pimp's going to come for me here. Like, you guys should be worried, you know? And we drove by school and she said, I miss school. I wish I could go back to school. So I think that they're people, you know, it is so overwhelming, right? It's just so overwhelming. There's a lot of organizations like in Minneapolis, there's like, you know, there are a lot of places that we can support as pastors and members of churches, places you can volunteer. But, you know, another thing that I remember was they're like, you don't care about me. You're not going to stick around for me.
Yeah.
So I have to go back. So I don't know. Maybe this is not helpful, but I kind of wanted to give you like I don't know.
A real life situation. Yeah. And yes, a story. And Pastor Michelle, I'm sure, has some stories as well. Yeah. And those are so there are so many of those stories. And the partners, again, that we have vetted are replete with those stories, unfortunately, but they're there for us to make this issue real. You know, we could talk about issues abstractly, but when you're talking about sex trafficking and you meet these women and these girls and boys, this is not just exclusively women, by the way. There are boys involved too, but you meet them and you hear their stories. It's like, oh, all right, this isn't abstract. These they have names, and they have families. They're people. They're people made in the image of God, and we need to figure out how to love them for real. So thank you for putting a human face and a name to these 4.7 million people who are trapped in this life.
Amen. Amen.